everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. I am Stu Hardy, joined, as always, by Derek Brissett. We apologise that last week we were unable to record, but, that just means there's more rugby for us to talk about this week. So, Derek, how has your week been?
Oh, it's been good. Yeah, it didn't really do much. Yeah, COVID's apparently still a thing. A lot of people at my work learned that this week. Didn't record last week because I quite frankly could not. Hopefully I can string together more than 2 sentences during this podcast without coughing. So that's what I'm kind of hoping for. So basically it just meant that I spent my entire week basically just watching movies and sorting through comic books. Stu, I'm assuming you did something a little bit more exciting than that. Hopefully. Please, I hope other people are living while I'm stuck in my apartment.
Yeah, I've been fortunately able enough to go outside, enjoy the end of summer while I still can.
Yeah.
The Formula One season has resumed after its summer break. So I was watching the Belgian Grand Prix. I was exploring more of Toronto, specifically its unique breweries along the way.
Where did you go?
Oh, where didn't I go?
Yeah.
I gotta recommend, if anyone can make it, is a High Park Brewery, which surprisingly is not near High Park.
It's really not.
No. It's really not, but it is really worth going if you're a fan of Lost Crap and their, what they can provide. But anyway, let's get on to the actual topic of the podcast, which is rugby, because this weekend we had, both 15s rugby and 7s rugby. So we're going to start off with the 15s game taking place at the Wanderers ground in Halifax. It was Canada versus Wales in Canada's final warm-up game before the Rugby World Cup in October. And, going into this game, I pointed out that Wales have improved since Canada last played them. They've got more players that are professional now. I think it's now up to 29 full-time professional players for Wales. So, we don't know what could have happened. Maybe it would have been a tougher matchup. But that was before the game, because then the game actually happened. And to be fair, yeah, I did watch the game. And Wales, to their credit, did start pretty strong. Were the first team to get points on the board. Then Canada remembered that they were Canada and wanted to show what you got. So we had total of 5 tries scored by Canada, 2 by Faris, 1 by Forteza, 1 by Grant, and 1 by Pelletier. And we had 2 conversions by Miller, 1 by De Goody, to give the final score of Canada 31, Wales 3. So after all my hype of saying that, Wales are professional now, they can put up a challenge, they actually had a bigger score difference than the last time they played them. So what do I know?
Who do you cheer for during these games?
Rugby, because either way, I win. So
that's fair. Yeah. That's fair.
Were you able to catch any of this game, Derek?
Oh yeah, no, I thought it was a great game. It was, to be honest, we took a little podcast break, so it's probably the first full 80-minute game I've watched in like a month, which is good, a good introduction back to it. Like you said, I think Wales got off to a better start. Maybe you had like the Wales hat on early, and then you had to take it off after 15 minutes. Switch it to the Canada one. Not really sure how you.
I just wore a red hat and
just wore red.
Just kept it easier for everyone.
So that means you were not cheering for the black and green team then.
Well, their badge is red, so
but they're black and green. So like you kind of said, Wales got off to a bit of a better start. Jasmine Joyce kind of came out the gates on fire a little bit. And then unfortunately, I guess as the game went on, she seemed to be the only Welsh player that was really making a super big impact. So Canada kind of, as you mentioned, sort of took over. After that, the set piece was dominant. Both scrum lineouts were working really well, and obviously they were scoring tries as a result of them. Maddie Grant, just obviously, she got player of the match from the broadcast, and I feel like that was a pretty easy decision for them.
Yeah.
She was obviously all over the pitch, scoring tries, setting up other tries, some great defensive plays as well. So I mean, it's probably one of the best games I've seen her play. So thought that was great. And then obviously, just there's just a lot of like really good things that I thought Canada was doing once they kind of, I mean, like you said, slow start. So obviously you want to, don't want to let that happen too much, because against England or New Zealand or something, that could come back to bite
Yeah.
you. But like once everybody kind of settled down or whatever, it was a pretty thorough and dominant performance, which, considering, I mean, like this is their last game before the World Cup, right? Like their next game that they're playing is against Italy in the World Cup, right? And
Yeah.
Italy, as you mentioned, they beat them already. So I mean, we're like 5 weeks away from the start of the World Cup now.
Yeah, we're
Five and
just
a half.
I think it's like we're just over a month away.
Yeah, so it's like October 9th is Canada's first game against
Mm-hmm.
Italy. And, so I mean, if that's the last game before going over, like, I mean, before, heading overseas, then like, that's a solid team performance. Just across the board. It was like it's kind of exactly what you would want to see happen, especially if you're a higher seeded team playing a lower seeded team. Like you dominate at the set piece, and defensively, like 3 points on the board. Joyce was really the only Welsh player that seemed to be a super big threat offensively attacking. And then any other opportunities that they got that ended up near Canada's line were shut down pretty promptly, and Canada was able to clear their line. So I mean, overall, definitely can't complain, man. If that's what the squad's going to be looking like going into the World Cup, it's probably a pretty good sign. And then it's I'm pretty happy about that being the last game before the World Cup. So I mean, I wish they kind of had another one in like the month before it, but I guess it is what it is.
It is, yeah. I've got to mention the in the build up to the second try of the game, which was by Forteza. Something of that. There was a line out basically on halfway, and like the maul that came from that was an absolute monster, just like unstoppable up until in the 22, basically a few meters out, and that gave Forteza enough time to just pick up and power over to get like the second try, like 4 minutes after the first. And I think that was when Wales fully understood that they were a bit outmatched in this game. But congratulations to Canada's women on winning both of their warm-up games. And as we said, Canada's Rugby World Cup campaign begins in New Zealand on October 9th against Italy. Now we move from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast, and we go from the women's 15s to the men's 7s, because it was the final leg of the World 7 Series in LA, delayed obviously because of COVID. And, from a dominant win from Canadian women, it was pretty much the opposite for the men's 7s team, unfortunately. They unfortunately lost every game that they played. Then again, they did have a very tough group of games. They are facing New Zealand, South Africa, and the host USA.
Are they any good?
Well, good? Yeah, I've heard. Well, then again, the USA beat South Africa in the pool stages, so I'm not entirely sure. Then again, Wales beat South Africa during the 7th, so I think it's time for those smaller nations to move aside and let some of these unknown countries like Wales and the USA take over and give them the opportunities. So the final result was that New Zealand won the LA Sevens. However, Australia, by finishing third, won the World Series for the first time. So congratulations to them. And as that concludes the altered World Series, because as we know, the LA Sevens were meant to take place much earlier this year. We now have a 2-week wait until we head down to Cape Town in South Africa, where the Rugby World Cup Sevens will take place from the 9th to the 11th of September. Now, Canada have qualified for this. They qualified with the Rugby Americas North tournament earlier this year. But yeah, and it's a different format from the World Series. It's basically winner stays on. It's an elimination format. Canada will have a preliminary game to determine their ranking for the men's tournament. For the women's tournament, it's straight into the round of 16. So, much easier. There's only 16 teams for the women's game. There are a total of 24 for the men's. So Canada will face Zimbabwe on the 9th of September to determine their ranking match when it comes to the round of 16. And from there, if they win that game, and hopefully they should, because Canada is 10th and Zimbabwe is 23rd, they will then have the delight of facing, let me just check, France. And from there, it'll basically, not, it could be worse. I mean, there's got South Africa, England, and New Zealand, and Argentina, and Fiji as automatic places. It'll be honest, France is ranked 7th because they qualified automatically from the 2018 Sevens World Cup. So, if they get 2 victories, they will then be able to qualify automatically for the next Rugby Sevens World Cup in 2026. Or not. They may change the format of qualifying. I have no idea. I'm not a soothsayer. But we shall see. So that competition runs from the 9th to the 11th and all held at Cape Town Stadium. Derek, anything you want to add for the Sevens?
No, I don't know. Not really, I guess. It's, obviously, it'd be nice to see Canada do well. I don't know. For some reason, I feel like there's a lot less hype for this tournament than perhaps normal. I don't know. Like it's like I don't know. Like I guess like the World Cup Sevens. Do they do enough to differentiate it from just any other stop on the tour? Like it just, especially considering the tour just ended and like we're crowning a champion last week. Congrats to Australia. Billy Meek's getting some MLR representation on that squad too. But like I don't know. I guess like I don't know. I guess like I'm gonna watch it. Like I think it'll be fun. It'll definitely be cool. I think like see the thing is it's like with this tournament, like how many like I don't know if I don't like the format.
Yeah, it's not ideal, really, like, I'd say.
It's okay, so you obviously have all the teams that lose go in to like play other games and stuff, but it's like how many like I guess meaningless games during this, like you know what I mean, like so the pre-round of 16 goes into the bowl and there's 10 games in the bowl competition, including games for the teams that lose in the first round of the bowl competition. Like for this match 42, the teams that have lost 3 games in it, like you know what I mean, like match 42, which is just like the winner of the losing side of the bowl, like why do we need to play that game in the World Cup?
It's...
like I get like during the rest of like the 7 series and stuff where you need to like determine points and you need to determine table standing for like the entire year and stuff, but it's like for this, like what do we need to play that game for? Like would it not be more, it's like it's almost more interesting to just do the normal format.
Right? and especially as well when you look at something like the Olympics, for example, that has I think it was like 16 teams for the men and 12 for the women's. I'm probably getting that wrong, but then you have it as basically a week-long competition. So you have the men's competition first, and then once that concludes, you have the women's competition, and it's spaced out more evenly, and it allows a break between pool games so that you can format the tournament easy. And I imagine like with 24 teams, you can easily break that into like 6 pools of 4 and then it's basically a case of if you get top of the pool, you go through to the next round, and then it's and then it's more of a competition of you can't like take your foot off the gas. You have to keep scoring tries and stuff like that. And then I'm just spitballing like a different foot. I'm like having more teams for the World Cup. Sure, that makes sense because you want to have as like many teams involved as possible. And because this is a World Rugby sanctioned event, having more teams basically means having more viewers and more ticket sales and more money. And unlike the Olympics, where it can be capped depending on whatever Olympic governing body decides, we'll only have 3 pools of 4 teams or 4 pools of 4 teams, and that's as many as we're going to allow because we have to condense it to this amount. I'm saying like if it's a World Cup, make it longer, make it more exciting, make it more interesting. Make it like the bigger version of a leg of the World Series, and make it a week-long party wherever it's held.
Yeah, and maybe like I think maybe that's the thing. Like maybe maybe more teams. More teams and more games that feel like they matter. I mean, you kind of look at if you go to the Rugby World Cup Sevens like website, they have the format tab, right? And it's like if you really go through that, like you kind of have like a pre-qualification round, I guess is how they're wording it, the pre-round of 16. So it's kind of like I guess that's kind of like the play-in games for like the baseball. The MLB playoffs, they have like the play-in game for like the last team. I guess it's kind of basically the same idea.
Yeah, I'd say if you like if you change it like the NFL is like wild card. You have like those who have qualified automatically get a bye to the round of 16, and then everyone else has to go through the hard way.
Right. So like that's the thing though. So say like you get to the round of 16, that's really 16, 8, 4, 2. Right, like that's 4 rounds. The games that matter, you could probably play them all in one day.
Yeah.
Like if you just give the teams enough, I guess, like a little bit of enough time. Like, because that's the thing, right? Like so say like one of these round of 16 teams, right?
Yeah.
Wins. Okay, let's pick one. Let's pick the USA. Let's be hopeful for our neighbors south of the border here.
Yeah.
Like if the USA wins this tournament, what do they play? 4 games?
1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4 games.
They play 4 games, right? And it's like you play less games on a normal. That's less games than like a normal. Like if you were to win a normal stop on the tour.
Yeah.
Like you have to, you know what I mean? You have to win. If you're one of the pre-round of 16 teams and you were to win, so let's be hopeful for our friends north of the border, i.e. us. So if Canada is going to win this, they have to win 5 games.
So this is my point. So if you get to so obviously you get to the cup final, but then there's also like the bronze final if you lose the semi-final. Mm-hmm. If you lose the quarterfinal, you then go for 5th place, where there's no trophy.
Oh, no.
But if you were to lose the round of 16, so let's say that's your first game, or even your second game. So you've won 1 game, then you lose a game, and then you win a couple more games, and then you get the challenge trophy for finishing 9th. So 5th place gets nothing. And 9th place gets a trophy.
Well,
so this is how I would like, because at the moment it seems to be that the Cup quarterfinalists automatically qualify for the next World Cup, which would include the 5th place final and the 7th place final. The Cup quarterfinalists automatically qualify for the next World Cup. So let's make it interesting. Let's have whoever wins the challenge trophy and the bowl, those nations also automatically qualify for the next World Cup. So then there's something to go towards. There's a reason to go to these games, a reason to watch these games as well. And then you can give teams 4 years to say, okay, you've qualified. You don't have to go through all these regional have a effect on you qualifying. Invest in rugby sevens, invest in, and then you have these developing nations come through. And I'm not saying they're going to automatically get to like the cup quarterfinals at the next World Cup sevens, but a bit of a challenge. Maybe even they could end up being a invitational guest on one of the stops of the World Series tour.
Yeah.
Just make it. Just give us a reason to watch these games.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's the biggest issue, like because at least like in the normal like series top like tour, like you have the pool stage, which every game in the pool stage kind of matters.
Mm-hmm.
But like for this, it's like you know what I mean? Like just looking at like the format and how it's already set up, it's like, man, like I'm gonna have a real hard time caring about like match 19, which is the two
Yeah,
teams between two teams that lost in the pre-16 round of 16.
yeah,
Like I'm not like it's like what incent like you know what I mean? Like because I said like there's no standings or tables, right? It's like the intrigue of this tournament is the teams that win and keep moving on to becoming closer and closer to being the World Cup champion. Right.
yeah,
But there's so many games being played between the teams that lose that
yeah,
it's like it feels like just on the schedule. It's like there's almost like there's more less interesting games than interesting games just based on like following the story of the teams that the team that's eventually gonna end up winning the World Cup.
yeah.
So it's like
So,
I agree
so
with you. It's like what do you do with those other games or like what do you do with those other games or like how do you get to make those more interesting or like I don't know, play for something, play for
yeah,
money. Like be like,
yeah,
yeah, we'll give your clubs donations or something
yeah,
like World Rugby funding. Like I don't if you win this game or something, like I that's the thing. It's like
yeah,
I'm looking at the format for this, and I think that's kind of like what dims the hype. Because I think like I mean, like I don't know, it seems like there's not a whole lot of hype being built up for this tournament
that's
regularly
true as well.
anyways. But it's also like looking at the format, I'm like, there's a lot of games that just are between teams that lose and have no further impact on the tournament that like I'm not sure how you get people to watch those more. You have to have something for them to be playing for. But
So the first game of the preliminary round is Ireland versus Portugal. Ireland is ranked ninth. Portugal is ranked 24th. What do you think the result of that game is going to be? Now, I love an upset as much as the next guy, but when you have games there, it's highest versus lowest, then it's not interesting. But if you were to have, say, Ireland versus the high, so between 9 and 24 is split for the preliminary round, so it's then highest versus lowest. But if you were to take that and say Ireland would play 17th, which would be Ireland Chile, I think that would be a much closer game, a more interesting
sure.
result.
But if you did that, then you're going to have one of those lower ranked teams moving on automatically and then getting wiped by New Zealand.
True,
Right. So it's like
then
you're
again,
just
but
wasting it.
then again, I've seen like it's Wales versus South Korea, and I think that's match 6. And who are they playing? So match six's winner is playing Fiji,
Yeah. Cool. Best team in the
defending
world.
Olympic champions.
Yeah.
So so
One of the
then
best teams.
then my question is like,
They're going to get killed
if
anyway.
and yeah, if the team's going to get killed anyway, then does it matter which one goes through, or do you just have a little bit of fun, have a little bit more competition, and
My
and,
my issue
and
isn't with the preliminary round or like the seeding or anything because obviously I mean that's just a general sports thing. The higher seeded teams are going to play the lowest seeded teams. That's
yeah,
the benefit of being a higher seeded team, right?
yeah,
In every single tournament bracket kind of format. That's your advantage of being a higher seeded team is you get to play lower seeded teams.
mm,
Um right? So it's like that's kind of fine. And it's like the thing is though with that is it's like I am much more interested. You're saying talking about the close game thing, right? So it's
mm,
like teams are going to lose, right? So it's like the bowl competition is probably going to have the close games that you're talking about,
yeah,
right? It's just that no one's going to care because
yeah,
they don't have an impact on the tournament as a whole. Like unless you're a
yeah,
fan of that country, because
yeah,
you're just those games are going to be close. I'm not saying
yeah,
those games are going to be bad, but when they have no impact on who's going to win the World Cup, and there's no
yeah,
impact on the greater standings for like a year long season, those games between the losing teams, although they might be close and they might be entertaining, just kind of feel like, I don't know, I guess it's you know, they just kind of feel like that, like the extra, like the comedian that you don't really care about that's doing, like, that's opening for like the band that you actually paid to come see. It's
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? It's like, you might laugh, you might enjoy yourself, it might be a good time, but ultimately it's like you're just waiting for the band that you want to
Yeah.
come see, right?
Well, yeah, you do have a point, and but we'll be watching the Rugby World Cup sevens when they happen in the second full weekend of September. That'll be from the 9th
Yeah.
to 11th. Now, a short view back to the past, because a couple of weeks ago it was the 2022 MLR Collegiate Draft,
Ooh.
and
Yeah, let's get caught up on all our MLR news now.
yeah,
We missed
so let's go through every single person that got drafted. Actually, let's reduce it down. Let's focus on the Toronto's draftees, and or should we just say the Canadian draftees?
Yeah, I was gonna say the 8 that matter.
Yeah, well, 8, an increase from 5 from last year. So, always good to see. So we'll start off with the Arrows picks. So in the first round, they picked Owen Rattan, who was a flanker from UBC, and the Arrows had traded their second round pick, and so basically they had 2 picks in the third round. The first one was Gabe Casey, who plays fly half or fullback from UVic, as well as Denver Fat, a hooker, also from UVic as well. But the first Canadian to be drafted across MLR was Cali Martinez, a prop from UBC, and he's been drafted to Old Glory DC. Seth Purdy, a center from Cal, has been drafted to ATL. Ethan Hager, a winger from UVic, has been drafted to Dallas. Sam Weggert, a center from Trinity Western, has been drafted to Seattle. And Jack Shaw, a center / wing from Bishops, has been drafted to Rugby ATL. So ATL picking up 2 Canadians, obviously more Canadians the better. DC with Cali Martinez, the first Canadian to be drafted, 3rd pick overall of 2022. And then Hager and Weggert as well. So a big showing from UVic, who had the most with 3. UBC had 2. And, Trinity Western and Bishops and Cal each 1 apiece. Derek, what are your thoughts on the Canadians drafted?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, UVic, UBC are kind of the perennial 2 best schools in the country. So, I mean, not really a surprise to see that they're dominating the MLR drafts, at least as far as the Canadian content goes. Overall, overall, super cool to see 3 Canadians get selected in the top 5, and then I guess with Hagar going to Dallas after, so that's 4 Canadians total in the top 10 of the draft. So that's obviously great to see. Rutten is obviously, no, he's a flanker. So that's just adding, I guess it's tough. See, here's the thing. It's kind of funny because I know you have the list of all the Arrows that have been re-signed below it after, right? Which is Malcolm, Richardson, O'Neill, Shepard, and then they signed Nick Ben out of Australia. But it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, my initial thought on like looking at Rutten getting drafted, and I'm like, I know he's a phenomenal player and stuff, but I was also like, ooh, is that like, that's interesting that the Arrows are picking a guy at like their deepest position with their the 5th overall pick. Right. And then but then I'm also kind of looking at the actual roster. I'm like, it's one of the interesting things with looking at the MLR draft is it's like, who knows what the actual roster looks like for next year.
Yeah.
So my initial reaction was like, oh, that's interesting. That they're picking a player at their deepest position. But then I'm also like, well, who knows what that position looks like for next year? Because as of right now, James O'Neill is the only official, back row player signed. So obviously, I'm totally fine with that pick now. After that, Gabe Casey, we need fly halves. So yeah, that's a good pick. That's a good pick. Doesn't it? Yeah, the fly half is I mean, that's part of it right now. Like we need to be developing fly halves and stuff. And then obviously, you probably can't go wrong. Denver Fat, you can't go wrong picking front row players in the draft either. That's kind of evidence too. DC picked up Cali Martinez, who's a prop from UBC. So that like it's all that's so it's great to see. I mean, I've said it before on this podcast where it's like, man, I do not watch enough collegiate rugby to really speak intelligently on any of these picks, other than it's like I'm super excited that there's the number of Canadians being drafted is going up. I do kind of wonder, like I don't know, like I kind of wonder if like the Arrows' position in the draft like force, I guess, if the American teams are kind of, if they want a Canadian, looking at the way the draft kind of shaped up, I'm kind of like, I wonder if the American teams, if they want a Canadian, are like super conscious of like where the Arrows pick in the draft or whatever. Cause it's like you had obviously Rutten goes 5th. So like right before him though, you have Martinez and Purdy go 3-4.
Yeah.
So you have 2 Canadians that go before the Arrows pick.
Yeah.
Right. And then
makes sense.
Yeah, right. And then you have Hager who goes to Dallas right after the Arrows, but then like you go through like a full almost round and a half before the Arrows next pick, and the only like and then like the next 2 Canadians that get selected, I believe, if I got like Weigart was Seattle's last pick before Toronto again, and I think Shaw was after. But Shaw to Atlanta, I think, was after. But that's just like, I don't know. Like, I kind of wonder, it's like, like if the Arrows don't pick 5, like, are Canadians flying off the board in the top 5? Or like, and I mean, I'm just kind of like completely speculating on this, but I do wonder how much, knowing that the Arrows have, in the 2 drafts that they've been a part of, have really stuck to their philosophy of drafting that homegrown Canadian talent. And I wonder if like, part of the reason that, a lot of Canadians went early in the draft is because like, the Arrows had those early picks. You kind of even look at last year's draft where, what did we say? There was 5 Canadians drafted last year.
Yeah.
Right. The Arrows drafted 3 of them. The LA took James O'Neill before the Arrows' 3rd pick, which was Sam Mace. Sam Mace was their 3rd pick. Right. So the Arrows, so James O'Neill went before the Arrows could pick, and then the Arrows traded for him.
Yeah.
So like, right. And then Emerson Pryor went after.
Right.
So it's like,
you make a good point, because when we had James on the podcast, he was talking about being traded as well. We've also had Mike Smith tell us like the difficulties of securing a visa to play for these teams. So it may be a case that, these other teams are doing like some 4D chess and saying that, we know that the Arrows may need a prop. So
maybe.
So, and we know that obviously they want to pick Canadians. So if we get the rights to Cali Martinez, then
then you can get something from the Arrows.
Do a trade. Yeah, exactly. That may be like some,
that
like the long-term plan of like, but as in, obviously, I think hoping that all these guys get to play in the MLR next year.
Yeah.
And
I think ultimately, like, that's kind of the interesting thing too, right? Because this is the 3rd draft, right, that we've done it, and it's like, you got some GMs have changed teams, or teams have gotten new general managers and stuff. And it's like, I think the draft is still so new that I don't think like we're still trying to figure out how teams are going to go about the draft and stuff. Like I saw like a lot of, like online, it looked like there was a lot of talk about how Dallas allocated their 5 picks, picking a lot of backs instead of forwards in their draft.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think it's super interesting. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's like, it's interesting to see like how teams are starting to like go about the draft, and where that strategy kind of starts to kind of come in, right? It'll be interesting to see. And I mean, like, one of the things that I think you can kind of look for right now too, like, especially from like the perspective of the Arrows, last year, like none of the players at the Arrows draft played in the game.
Yeah.
Right. I know Martin Feek was injured for basically the entire year. So that's obviously a different situation. Mason Warden didn't play. And then James O'Neill obviously played quite a bit, but that also wasn't a player that the Arrows drafted. They had
Yeah, that's
another
true.
move to make that happen, right? So a player that's drafted by the Arrows still hasn't played a game for the Arrows yet. So be interesting to kind of see if obviously Rutten, Casey, or Fat can kind of change that going forward, because it's like it'll be interesting to kind of see how like once we get enough data on this, maybe like when the league is 10 years old or something, we've had like 7 or 8 drafts, start figuring out how well teams have actually done at drafting players and stuff.
Yeah.
Right now, like I said, one, I don't know enough about collegiate rugby on either side of the border to judge any of these picks. And 2, we don't really have enough data to go off of how well some of these guys turned out. I mean, some of them are obvious, like Andrew Guerrera last year. Obviously, that's a great pick. Right, and Lopetti this year, obviously a great pick. But you have some of the guys that obviously stand out. But it'll be interesting to see how like some of the guys that took like maybe an extra year to make an impact pan out, and see how well teams are really doing at the draft. It'll be interesting to look back on.
Yeah. Well, let's go from new players to familiar faces. As you mentioned, the Arrows have been busy at work signing and re-signing players. The first name to come out was Sam Malcolm. We'll be back for more next year. And the first official signing at the time of recording, which is August 29th. So, of course, between now and when the podcast gets released, there'll have been like 10 new signings announced for the Arrows. But Nick Benn from Manly in Australia, he is has a Canadian passport and will be registered as a domestic player, and has made his intention known that he wants to play for Canada. Mitch Richardson is back, as is James O'Neill and Mike Shepherd as well. So, we got a bit of experience. Obviously, Mitch Richardson had a fantastic season last year. James O'Neill, of course, first season in MLR coming over, and Mike Shepherd
signed the day after we recorded that interview.
Yeah, didn't tell us that in the interview, did you? But Mike as well has been with the team since its inception, been with them when they were the Ontario Arrows, that has that legacy behind him, and obviously was the captain in 2022. But we also, like an airport, we've announced our arrivals, and now we have to announce our departures. And the first one is the big name of Andrew Quatrin, who was originally traded to Utah for a foreign player slot, now been traded to New England for salary cap considerations. So going from the east to the west, spent a week there, and then back over to the east with New England. And New England have lots of Canadians there, the Mounties, as we like to call them. Foster DeWitt, Josh Larson, Regan O'Gorman, Ethan Fryer, Isaac Olson, Jack Reeves, who is Canadian eligible, but we'll take that. He's one of us.
They traded for Connor Keys too.
That as well. So yeah, Connor Keys is in the mix as well. So maybe they should just change it from New England Free Jacks to New England Mounties.
They're getting all the Canadian locks.
Yeah.
Bit of a Canadian front row going.
Yeah,
like we can they're just a couple back row players away from we can start rolling an all Canadian pack in New England soon.
Yeah,
they're on their way. They're well on their way there.
Yeah. Two other departures that have been making their way across the Atlantic to England in the National League is Will Kelly is the first of them. He has signed with Chinnor, and he has been taking part in some of their pre-season games. And been scoring conversions, so already getting on, already making an impact. And Sam Mace has announced that he has signed with Lead Tights. So best of luck to all you guys. Hopefully we can see you back over in the this side of the Atlantic in MLR colours at some point. But we wish you all the best and good luck to you. So now we're just going over some competitions that have happened recently, and the big one of them is the delayed Bingham Cup, which was meant to take place in 2020, was delayed to 2022. So for those that don't know, the Bingham Cup is the World Cup feature of the International Gay Rugby Association. It's the largest, and this one in 2022 was the largest and most inclusive Bingham Cup to date. There were lots of talks of inclusion in the sport, especially trans inclusion. I was fortunate enough to be able to get a ticket to listen to some of the speakers speaking about resisting homophobia and transphobia in sport, especially with the recent announcements by the RFU and the Irish Rugby Union of that are essentially just excluding a handful of players from the game that they love. And, it was really challenging to hear some of these players talking about how much they love this sport. And now they have to consider not only the politics of their sports governing body, but also the politics of their nation. And I think one that struck a chord with me really well is that one trans player was saying that her interactions with other players usually comes down to what is your exit plan? What is your plan that when the law changes and it makes your existence a crime or an offense, where are you going to go? And she was a American Canadian player, and she's already taken sight of what is going on in the United States at the moment, especially in some more conservative areas of the country. And she's saying that obviously she's grateful that she can just go to Canada, but that is an option for a lot of players. And it's just basically spiteful at this point. And when you have someone like the RFU that just say that trans players cannot play at a professional level, even though they had a system in place that allowed the monitoring and progress of how these players' impact can have on the sport, because it seems to have just been made out of fear or ignorance. And fully grateful for these athletes and contributors to the sport we love coming out and saying, trans people weren't included in this discussion. Even women rugby players, cisgendered women, weren't included in this discussion. This had just been made by a small group of people to appease another small group of people. And it's just been done without expense of expense wasn't a thing when it was just these small considerations. Like, as I said, for the RFU, it was only 6 trans players. For the Irish Rugby Union, it was only 2. So, it's something that needed to be said. I'm grateful to have heard it. And
are these talks available anywhere for anybody that missed them?
I believe they may be on the Bingham Cup YouTube page, because I believe they were recorded. And if you have the,
I was gonna say, where did you watch them?
So I was invited onto a Zoom link and was able to watch them there, and they were going on throughout the day. But yeah, because for example, in Toronto, there are the Rainbow Griffins. They are one of the clubs that are included in the Bingham Cup as well, and as well as Muddy York RFC. And if it's a sport that says rugby is for all, then you have to mean all. So I'm grateful for these talks, and I'm grateful that the Cup was actually held in Canada, in Ottawa. We had the Nathan Rhombus give a video, and his first since he's become CEO of Rugby Canada. So I think that was a great point to make as well. And we also had, so similar to the Rugby Sevens World Cup, there were multiple different trophies available for the teams that were competing. So the Bingham Bowl was won by the Seattle Quake. The Bingham Plate was won by the Dublin Emerald Warriors. The new Amanda Cup, which is exclusive for women's rugby teams, was won by the Ottawa Wolves. And in a shock turn of events, Australia was not present for the first time in a Bingham Cup final. And therefore, the Bingham Cup for 2022 was won by the King's Cross Steelers. So congratulations to all the teams involved, and thank you to all the teams that took part. And if you're wondering when the next Bingham Cup will be, it's not like the standard World Cup, which is every 4 years. It is every 2 years. Obviously, COVID had a bit of an issue with it being in 2020. But the Bingham Cup will next take place in 2024. The location is to be determined, but follow the Bingham Cup and IGR on social media, and I'm sure you'll be able to find out where and when that will be held. And finally, we've been talking about women's 15s, men's 7s, the MLR Draft, the Bingham Cup, and we still haven't finished because we're going to wrap up with the Under-20s Canadian Series. So, as we know, the World Rugby Under-20s Championship has been cancelled again, and hopefully will be back in 2023. But Canada decided to host a competition at University of Guelph with Zimbabwe, Chile, and Uruguay, all their Under-20s teams. Their first game against Zimbabwe was unfortunately a loss, 32-24. Then the second game was against Chile, and that was a very narrow victory, 25-24. But hey, if Canada knows one thing about playing Chile, it's winning by 1 point on Canadian soil. And the final game was a loss to Uruguay, 28-45. So the final ranking places were Uruguay came first, Zimbabwe second, Canada third, and Chile fourth. And, obviously not to the same level as the Under-20s Championship or the Under-20s Trophy, but considering there hasn't been any Under-20s action in the Americas since 2019, it's something. It's something. No complaints from me. And and if you are looking to watch any rugby this weekend, you can watch it on the Rugby Championship, which will be on tsn.ca and the TSN app. Unfortunately, all the other competitions we mentioned are all a few weeks ahead, so you've only got the Rugby Championship. And if you're up at 3:15 in the morning, sure you can watch the Argentina beat New Zealand for the second time in as many weeks. We shall see. But that is where we're going to conclude this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to listen to more of them, you can do so on Anchor FM, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you like watching our dazzling faces, you can do so on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is at Rouge Rugby. In fact, you can find us across all social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, again, at Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people of the internet find you?
I'm at Brissette the Jet across all social media platforms, and I promise to actually return to using them at this point in time.
You can find me across social media platforms, mainly Twitter and Instagram, at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, Derek, I think we finally caught up with all the rugby over the past few weeks that we've been away from. It's a pleasure to have you join me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. We hope you can join us again next time.